My name is Noah Carter. I was 28 years old, and before that night, the most expensive thing I had ever bought was my used Tesla. I was not a billionaire. I was not some powerful executive. I was just a young software engineer working at one of the fastest growing tech companies in Seattle. And my boss, Claire Whitmore, the CEO everyone feared. People called her the Ice Queen. Not because she was cruel. Actually, that was the strange part. Claire was always professional, always calm, always in control. She never raised her voice. She never showed panic. She could walk into a room full of investors who were threatening to cancel a billion-dollar deal and make them apologize within 10 minutes. But when it came to personal matters, nobody knew anything. Nobody had ever seen her date anyone. Nobody had ever seen her laugh. At least, nobody at the company, including me. I had worked under her for almost 3 years, and I had learned one important rule. Never joke with Claire Whitmore. Unfortunately, that was exactly what I did. It happened during our company's annual celebration dinner. The whole team had been drinking, celebrating a successful quarter. Our stock had gone up. Our newest product had attracted major investors. And for once, everyone was relaxed. Even Claire was there. That alone surprised everyone. Usually, she would leave after giving a short speech. 5 minutes. That was her record. But that night, she stayed. My friend Ethan leaned toward me and whispered, "Noah, this is your chance." I looked at him. My chance for what? He smiled. "You've been working with her for 3 years. Tell me you haven't noticed." Noticed what? That every guy in this room is terrified of her. I laughed. That's because they enjoy keeping their jobs. Ethan looked at Claire across the room. She's 32, worth hundreds of millions, and probably has every man in Seattle trying to impress her. I shrugged. She probably rejects them all. Why? I thought for a second. Then I smiled. Because nobody is brave enough. Ethan laughed. "Are you saying you are?" I shook my head. "No way." Then, without thinking, I added, "unless I suddenly become rich." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "How rich?" I looked at Claire and joked, "Rich enough that I don't have to worry about her being my CEO." Everyone around us laughed. Then Ethan asked, "How much would it take?" I smiled. "I don't know." I pretended to think. "Maybe $60 million. The people around us laughed harder. $60 million? I nodded. "Sure. If I had $60 million, I'd marry Claire Whitmore." I expected another laugh. Maybe someone would make a joke. Maybe Claire would never even hear about it. But then the room became quiet. Not completely. Just enough for me to realize something was wrong. I slowly turned around. Claire was standing behind me, holding a glass of water. Her expression was impossible to read. The Ice Queen had heard everything. My stomach dropped. "Ms. Whitmore." She looked at me. "Noah." Her voice was calm. Too calm. I immediately started explaining. That wasn't serious. It was just a joke. "I know." She took a sip of water. "That's why it was interesting." I didn't know what to say. Ethan suddenly disappeared. Smart move. I was alone. Claire looked at me for a few seconds. Then she asked, "Do you believe marriage is something money can buy?" I frowned. "No, of course not." "Then why did you put a price on it?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because honestly, I had no answer. I was just being stupid. Finally, I smiled. Because $60 million sounded impossible. For the first time in 3 years, I saw something different in Claire's eyes. Not anger. Not annoyance. Amusement. A tiny smile appeared. Almost invisible. Almost. Interesting answer. Then she walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I arrived at the office expecting another normal day. Instead, Claire's assistant was waiting outside my desk. "Noah, Ms. Whitmore wants to see you." I immediately became nervous. "What happened?" The assistant simply said, "You'll find out." That was never a good sign. I entered Claire's office. She was sitting behind her desk reading documents. She didn't look up. "Close the door." I did. Then she pointed at the chair. "Sit." I sat down. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Then she placed a folder in front of me. "Open it." I looked confused. "What is this?" "Open it, Noah." I opened the folder. The first thing I saw was a bank document. Then I saw the number. $60 million. I froze. I looked up. What is this? Claire leaned back. Your answer. I stared at her. My answer? Last night you said you would marry me if you had $60 million. I laughed nervously. Wait, you're serious? She pushed another document toward me. A check. A real check. With her signature. $60 million. My hands went cold. Claire. She looked directly at me. You said money was the reason you couldn't marry me. That was a joke. I know. Then why? For the first time, her expression changed. She looked almost offended. Not because of the joke. Because she thought I misunderstood her. Because everyone around me wants something from me. Her voice became quieter. They want my company, my money, my connections. She looked at the check. But yesterday, you were the first person who said something to my face without wanting anything. I stared at her. I had no idea what to say. Then she stood up, walked around the desk, and placed the check in front of me. Pick a date. I blinked. What? Our wedding. I thought I had misheard her. You're asking me to marry you? Yes. Because of a joke? No. She looked at me. Because I need someone I can trust. That answer confused me even more. Claire, you are the CEO of a company worth billions. You can marry anyone. Her eyes hardened slightly. That's exactly the problem. She turned back toward the window. Everyone wants to marry Claire Whitmore, the CEO. Then she looked at me. I want someone who sees me as Claire. I stayed silent. Because suddenly, the joke wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't about $60 million. This was about a woman who had everything except someone she could trust. But there was one thing Claire didn't tell me that day. The moment I accepted that check, I wasn't just agreeing to a marriage. I was stepping into a war. And everyone in her world was about to find out that the man they thought was bought for $60 million was the one person they couldn't control. I stared at the check for a long time. $60 million. It wasn't a number that belonged in my life. It belonged in business magazines. It belonged next to names like investors, founders, and billionaires. Not next to Noah Carter, a software engineer who still checked his bank account before ordering food. I looked at Claire. You realize how crazy this sounds, right? She didn't react. I'm aware. You're offering me $60 million to marry you. No. I frowned. No. She shook her head. I'm offering you $60 million because I already decided who I want to marry. I leaned back. That somehow sounds even crazier. For a moment, I expected her to get annoyed. But Claire just looked at me calmly. You think I make decisions based on emotions? No. Good. Because I don't. She opened another file. This is a legal marriage agreement. I stared at her. Of course it is. She ignored my comment. There are conditions. I knew it. There had to be. A woman like Claire Whitmore didn't wake up one morning and randomly hand someone $60 million. What conditions? First, we stay married for at least 2 years. 2 years? Yes. And after that? You can decide what you want. I looked at the contract. And the money? Yours. I laughed. You're telling me I get $60 million, stay married for 2 years, and then I can leave? Yes. That sounds less like a marriage and more like a business deal. Claire's expression changed slightly. That's because it is. Her answer surprised me. Most people would have tried to make it sound romantic. She didn't. She was honest. That was something I respected. So, why me? Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked, do you remember 3 months ago when our payment system crashed? I nodded. Of course, I remembered. It was one of the worst days of my career. Our entire platform went offline. Investors were panicking. The engineering department was blaming each other. Everyone was trying to protect themselves, but I stayed. I worked for 30 hours straight and found the problem. You fixed it, she said. I was just doing my job. No. She looked at me. You were the only person who didn't care about looking important. I stayed quiet. Claire continued, when the executives were arguing, you were solving the problem. I looked away. That didn't explain marriage. At least, not to me. Claire, there has to be another reason. Her face became serious. There is. She closed the file. My grandfather created Whitmore Technologies. I nodded. Everyone knew that. What does that have to do with me? His will. I froze. What? 6 years ago, before he died, he changed his inheritance agreement. She handed me another document. The person who controls the family trust must be married. I read through the information and my relatives have been waiting for me to fail. I looked up. Because you're not married? Because they believe I'm too focused on the company. She smiled slightly. They think a woman cannot lead a billion-dollar company without a husband standing beside her. That's ridiculous. Yes. Her voice became colder, but it's also reality. I understood. Her family wasn't looking for love. They were looking for weakness. And if you don't get married, my uncle becomes chairman. I frowned. Your uncle? Richard Whitmore. I knew that name. Everyone in the company knew. He was one of the board members and he had been trying to take control for years. So this marriage protects your company. Yes. And you picked me because I'm convenient. Claire looked at me. No. The answer came instantly. That surprised me. You're not convenient, Noah. She leaned forward. You're unpredictable. I almost laughed. That's supposed to be a compliment. It is. For the first time, I saw something close to a smile. You are the only person in my company who talks to me like I'm a normal person. I looked at the contract again. Everything about this was insane. A fake marriage, a $60 million check, a battle with one of America's most powerful families. But then I thought about Claire, not the CEO, the person, the woman who had spent years surrounded by people who only wanted something from her. Maybe that was why she chose me. Because I was the only person who didn't know how to play her game. I picked up the pen. Claire watched me carefully. You're agreeing? I looked at her. I have one condition. Her eyebrows lifted. What? I don't want your money. For the first time, Claire looked genuinely surprised. You don't? No. I pushed the check back. If I marry you, it's because I choose to. The room went silent. Claire stared at me. You're refusing $60 million. Yes. Why? I smiled. Because if I accept that money, everyone will say I married you for it. She studied me. And what do you want them to say? I thought for a moment. Then I answered that I was the one person who chose you when you had nothing to offer. Something changed in Claire's expression. Just for a second. The ice queen disappeared. And I saw someone else. Someone who was tired. Someone who had been alone for too long. But before either of us could say anything, the office door opened. Claire's assistant, Jessica, rushed in. Claire, we have a problem. Claire immediately became the CEO again. What happened? Jessica looked at me. Then at Claire. The board knows. Claire's face changed. Knows what? About Noah. My heart sank. What about me? Jessica swallowed. They're saying you're using a random employee to fake a marriage. Claire stood up. Who started this? Jessica hesitated. Richard. Of course. Claire's uncle had already made his move. He called an emergency board meeting. When? Today. Claire looked at me. They want to prove I'm not capable of leading this company. I stood up. So, what's the plan? She looked surprised. You're asking for the plan? Yes. You can still walk away. I looked at the woman who had just offered me $60 million. The woman who trusted me when nobody else did. Then I looked at the contract sitting on the desk. I picked up the pen and signed. Claire stared. You understand what this means? I nodded. Yes. I handed the contract back. It means tomorrow I walk into that boardroom with you. She looked at my signature. Then at me. You know they will attack you. I know. They will say you're a gold digger. I know. They will try to destroy your reputation. I smiled. Claire. She looked at me. I survived 3 years working under you. A small smile appeared on my face. I think I can survive one board meeting. But I didn't know yet that meeting would change everything. Because when I walked into that boardroom beside Claire Whitmore, the people who thought they bought my silence for a marriage contract were about to discover they had invited their biggest threat inside. The next morning, I walked into Whitmore Technologies headquarters wearing the same suit I had owned for almost 2 years. Nothing about me looked like a billionaire's husband. That was exactly what they wanted. They wanted everyone to look at me and think, he doesn't belong here. And honestly, I knew they would. The moment Claire and I entered the boardroom, every conversation stopped. 12 executives were sitting around the table. Most of them looked at me like I was a mistake. A few looked amused. And one person looked satisfied. Richard Whitmore, Claire's uncle, the man who wanted her company. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. So, this is him. I looked at Claire. She didn't react. Richard. His smile widened. Claire, I have to admit you surprised me. He looked at me again. Out of everyone in the world, you chose a software engineer. Nobody laughed, but I saw several people trying not to. I pulled out my chair and sat down. Richard raised an eyebrow. You're comfortable here. I looked at him. Should I not be? This is a board meeting. I noticed. He smiled. Good. At least you understand where you are. Claire placed a folder on the table. This meeting is about the future of Whitmore Technologies. Richard interrupted. No, this meeting is about your judgment. Claire's expression hardened. My judgment? Yes. He pointed at me. You expect us to believe this marriage is real? The room became quiet. I knew this was coming. Richard wasn't attacking me because he cared about my relationship with Claire. He was attacking me because I was the one thing he couldn't predict. Claire answered calmly, my personal life is irrelevant to my ability to lead this company. Richard laughed. Is it? He looked around the room. Everyone here knows what happened. A screen behind him turned on. A photo appeared. Me and Claire leaving her office together. Taken from a distance. Then another. Me signing documents. Then another. The board members started whispering. Richard smiled. 3 days ago, nobody knew Noah Carter. Today, he is married to the CEO. He looked at me. Convenient timing. I stayed silent, because I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to get angry. He wanted me to defend myself emotionally. That would prove his point. But I didn't. Richard frowned. You have nothing to say? I looked at him. Do you want an answer? Yes. Then ask a real question. The room went silent. One board member looked up. Richard's smile disappeared slightly. What does that mean? It means you're not asking whether I'm qualified. I leaned forward. You're asking whether you can control me. Nobody spoke. Richard stared at me. For the first time, his confidence disappeared. Only for a second, but I saw it. Then he laughed. You think too highly of yourself. Maybe. I shrugged. But at least I think for myself. Claire looked at me. I could tell she wasn't expecting that answer. Richard tapped his fingers on the table. Fine. He opened another file. Let's talk about business. That was the moment I knew the real attack was coming. Whitmore Technologies is preparing for the biggest expansion in company history. He looked at Claire. And investors are concerned. About what? About stability. Claire's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you suggesting? Richard smiled. I'm suggesting that the company needs experienced leadership. There it was. The plan. Remove Claire. Replace her with himself. He continued. Your recent decisions have become emotional. Claire's expression changed. Emotional? Yes. He looked at me. This marriage proves it. I almost laughed. The logic was unbelievable. But before Claire could respond, I noticed something. A number on the financial report. Something was wrong. I reached for the document. Richard immediately stopped me. Excuse me. I looked at him. You're presenting this report? Yes. Then explain this. I pointed at the numbers. The third quarter projections. Everyone looked at the page. Richard frowned. What about them? These numbers don't match the internal data. The room became silent. Richard smiled. You reviewed our financial reports? No. Then how could you know? I looked at him. Because I built the prediction algorithm your company uses. Several people turned toward me. Claire looked surprised. Richard's face changed. You? Yes. I pointed at the report. The model predicts customer behavior based on 6 variables. I looked around the table. But your report only includes 5. One board member immediately picked up the document. Wait. He started checking. A few seconds later, his expression changed. He's right. The room became tense. Richard looked annoyed. That doesn't prove anything. No, I said. But it proves someone changed the numbers. Silence. Nobody moved. Claire looked at Richard. Did you know about this? Richard stood up. Don't be ridiculous. But he wasn't as calm anymore. And everyone noticed. The board members started whispering. Richard quickly changed direction. This is a distraction. He pointed at me. We are not here to discuss a technical issue. No. I looked at him. We're here because you're trying to remove Claire. His face became cold. And you think you can stop me? I smiled. I don't think. I looked at Claire. I know. For the first time since I entered the room, Claire looked at me differently. Not like an employee. Not like someone she had chosen for a contract. Like a partner. The meeting ended 2 hours later. Richard didn't remove Claire, but he didn't lose either. As we walked back to her office, Claire was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. You embarrassed him. I corrected him. You realize most people would be terrified to challenge Richard? I shrugged. He challenged me first. Claire stopped walking. Noah. I turned. What? Why did you do that? Do what? Protect me. I thought about it. The answer was simple. Because everyone in that room saw you as a CEO. I looked at her. I saw someone who needed someone on her side. For several seconds, Claire said nothing. Then she quietly asked, do you regret signing the agreement? I looked at her. The woman who had changed my life in less than 24 hours. The woman who gave me a chance because she believed I was different. No. A small smile appeared. Good. But then her phone rang. She answered and within seconds her expression changed. What happened? I watched her face become serious. Are you sure? A pause. Then she looked at me. Noah. Something was wrong. What? She lowered the phone. The investors just received an anonymous report. About what? Her eyes locked with mine. It says you manipulated me into marriage to gain access to the company. I froze. Because I knew what was happening. This wasn't just about Richard anymore. Someone was trying to destroy me. Claire looked at the message again. Then she said the words that changed everything. They're planning to force me out within 48 hours. I looked at the report, then at Claire, and I realized something. The marriage that was supposed to protect her had just become the weapon they were using against us. But they made one mistake. They underestimated me. The accusation spread faster than I expected. By the time I left Claire's office that afternoon, my name was already everywhere inside the company. Not because I had created something. Not because I had solved a problem. But because people believed I had tricked the most powerful woman in the building. Noah Carter, the engineer who married the CEO. That was the headline everyone was whispering. But the worst part wasn't the rumors. It was how quickly people believed them. I walked through the office and noticed conversations stopping whenever I passed. 2 employees near the elevator lowered their voices. He probably planned this. $60 million? Who wouldn't? I didn't respond because defending myself to people who had already decided I was guilty was pointless. But when I reached Claire's office, I found something unexpected. She was angry. Not cold. Not calm. Angry. Her assistant Jessica was standing across from her. I'm telling you, Claire, the board is moving faster than expected. Claire looked at the documents in her hand. They leaked the report before verifying anything. Yes. Then they wanted a reaction. Jessica nodded. They want you to panic. I walked in. Both of them turned toward me. Claire immediately asked, did you see the news? I nodded. Everyone has. Jessica looked uncomfortable. I'll give you 2 privacy. No. Claire stopped her. Stay. Jessica looked surprised. Claire rarely let anyone see her uncertainty. That alone told me how serious this was. I walked closer. So what happens now? Claire put the documents down. The board will hold a vote tomorrow. To remove you? Yes. How many votes? 7 out of 12. I frowned. That's almost a majority. Almost. She looked at me. Noah, I don't have enough. I had never heard Claire say something like that before. Not because she was weak. Because she hated admitting she needed help. I sat down. Tell me the truth. She looked at me. What? Did you know this could happen when you married me? A long silence followed. That was my answer. I stood up. You knew. Claire didn't deny it. I knew there was a possibility. A possibility? My voice became sharper. You gave me a check, asked me to marry you, brought me into your company, and didn't tell me people would try to destroy me? Her expression changed. I was trying to protect you. No. I shook my head. You were making the decision for me. Claire looked away. For the first time, I saw her lose control. Only slightly, but enough. You don't understand. Then explain. She was silent. Then she finally said, "My entire life, everyone around me has used me." That surprised me. Claire continued, "My father wanted a perfect daughter. My board wanted a perfect CEO. My family wanted a perfect heir." Her voice became quieter. "Nobody ever asked what I wanted. I didn't speak, because suddenly, I understood. Claire Whitmore wasn't cold because she didn't have feelings. She was cold because showing feelings had always been dangerous. But that didn't mean she was right. You should have trusted me." She looked at me. I did. "No." I shook my head. "You trusted me enough to marry you." A pause. "But not enough to tell me the truth." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Claire looked down. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I'm sorry." 2 words, but coming from Claire Whitmore, they meant something. Before I could answer, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her expression changed. "Richard." She answered. "What do you want?" I could hear Richard's voice from where I stood. Calm, confident, almost arrogant. Claire listened. Then her face became colder. "No." A pause. "You don't get to negotiate with me." She ended the call. I looked at her. "What did he say?" She didn't answer immediately. "Then, he wants me to resign. Or, he will release more information." "What information?" Claire hesitated, and that worried me. "Claire." She finally looked at me. "He has something from my past." I waited, but she didn't continue. "What?" She looked away. "A mistake." I frowned. "Everyone has made mistakes. Not mine." Her voice was serious. "If this comes out, investors won't care whether it's true or not." I understood. In business, reputation was everything. A rumor could destroy a company faster than a bad decision. Then we find out what he has. Claire shook her head. "You don't know Richard." "No." I looked at her, "But I know people like him." She stared at me. "What does that mean?" "It means powerful people always make the same mistake. Which is, they believe nobody can challenge them." For the first time that day, Claire almost smiled. Almost. Then Jessica suddenly rushed back into the room. "Claire." Her voice was tense. "What happened?" "The investors are here." Claire stood up. "Now?" "Yes." I looked confused. "Why?" Jessica looked at me. "Because they want to meet Noah." My stomach tightened. "Me?" Claire immediately understood. "They're not here to meet you." I looked at her. "They're here to judge me." She nodded. The investors entered the conference room 10 minutes later. 5 of the largest shareholders. People who controlled billions of dollars. The first man to speak was Daniel Brooks, one of the oldest investors in the company. He looked at me. "Noah Carter." "Yes." "I have one question." "Go ahead." "Did you marry Claire Whitmore because of money?" The room became silent. Claire looked at him. "Daniel." But I stopped her, because I knew this question wasn't only for me. It was for everyone watching. I looked directly at him. "No." He raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" I thought about the answer. Then I said, "Because she asked me." Nobody expected that. Daniel frowned. "That's it?" "Yes." I looked around the room. "But I understand why you're suspicious." I placed my hands on the table. "Because everyone assumes someone like me must have an agenda." Nobody spoke. "But here's the truth." I looked at Claire. "The woman you think is impossible to understand is actually the person who has spent years carrying this company alone." Claire looked at me, surprised. I continued. "You're not worried that I married her." I looked at the investors. "You're worried because for the first time, Claire has someone standing beside her." The room went quiet. Daniel studied me. Then he asked, "What exactly can you contribute to this company?" I smiled slightly. "More than you think." I opened my laptop and connected it to the screen. A data model appeared. Everyone looked confused. Claire looked at me. "What is this?" I answered, "The reason Richard's financial report was wrong." I clicked the screen and a series of hidden transactions appeared. The room changed instantly. Daniel stood up. "Where did you get this?" "I built a system 3 years ago." I looked at Claire. "Your company uses my algorithm." Silence. Then Daniel slowly turned toward Claire. "You knew?" Claire shook her head. "No." She looked at me. "I didn't." I continued. "The problem isn't the report." I pointed at the data. The problem is someone has been secretly moving money through a shell company. Everyone froze. Daniel's face changed. How much? I looked at the numbers. Approximately $84 million. Nobody spoke. Because suddenly, I wasn't the employee who married the CEO. I was the person who had found the problem threatening their company. And Richard Whitmore, he was no longer attacking me. He was running out of time. But what none of us knew was, Richard had one final move, and this time he wasn't trying to remove Claire. He was trying to destroy me. The room went silent after I revealed the hidden transactions. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because for the first time since this whole situation began, the attention was no longer on my marriage. It was on the person who had been stealing from the company. Daniel Brooks looked at the documents on the screen. Then he looked at Claire. Is this verified? Claire didn't take her eyes off the data. Noah, I nodded. I checked everything 3 times. Daniel turned back to me. You found an $84 million problem that our financial department missed. I closed my laptop. I didn't find it because I'm smarter than everyone here. I looked around the room. I found it because I built the system that everyone here uses. Nobody responded, and that was the moment I realized something had changed. Yesterday, I was the outsider, the joke, the guy who somehow ended up with the CEO. Today, they were listening, but I didn't feel victorious because I knew something. This wasn't over. Richard Whitmore didn't lose. Not yet. An hour later, the investors left. Claire stayed behind. She stood near the window, silent. I knew that look. She was thinking, calculating, trying to solve 10 problems at once. You're angry. She turned around. What? You're angry because I stepped into your fight. Claire looked at me. No. Then what? She walked toward the desk. I'm angry because you were right. I smiled slightly. That's rare. For me. She looked away. Yes. I laughed. For a second, she looked less like a CEO and more like a normal person. Then she became serious again. Noah. What? Why did you help me? I frowned. Because someone was trying to destroy you. You barely know me. That's not true. She looked surprised. We've worked together for 3 years. That's not knowing someone. She stared at me. So, what is? I thought about it. Seeing what they hide. Claire didn't answer. Because she knew exactly what I meant. Everyone saw the CEO. Nobody saw the woman behind the title. A few seconds passed. Then she asked, do you regret it? Regret what? The marriage. I looked at her. The question sounded simple, but it wasn't. Because for the first time, Claire wasn't asking as a CEO. She was asking as a woman. No. Her eyes moved slightly. Even after everything? Yes. Even knowing people think you married me for money? I smiled. People already thought that before they knew anything. That doesn't bother you? It would bother me if it were true. She was quiet. Then she said something I never expected. I was afraid you would leave. I froze. Claire Whitmore. The woman who controlled $1 billion company. The woman who made executives nervous. Was afraid. Why? She looked down. Because everyone eventually does. That sentence stayed with me. Because I suddenly understood. The biggest battle Claire was fighting wasn't against Richard. It wasn't against the board. It was against the belief that everyone around her would eventually betray her. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. A man's voice came through. Mr. Carter. I recognized it immediately. Richard. What do you want? A quiet laugh. I wanted to congratulate you. For what? For becoming the hero. I didn't respond. Richard continued. You found some money missing. Everyone thinks you saved the company. You sound disappointed. I'm not disappointed. His voice became colder. I'm impressed. I narrowed my eyes. Then why call? Because you don't understand the game you're playing. I understand enough. Noah. His voice lowered. You think Claire chose you because you're special. I stayed silent. She chose you because she was desperate. My hand tightened around the phone. You're wrong. Am I? Richard laughed. Ask her about the agreement. My expression changed. What agreement? Silence. Then Richard said, the one she never told you about. The call ended. I immediately looked at Claire. She saw my face. What happened? I didn't answer. Not immediately. Because I already knew. There was another secret. And this one involved me. Claire. Her expression changed. What? Richard said there was another agreement. The room became completely silent. I watched her face, and I got my answer before she spoke. You knew. Claire closed her eyes. Noah. You knew. She didn't deny it. I stepped back. What was it? She was silent. Claire. Finally, she said, my grandfather's trust has another condition. What condition? Her voice was quiet. The person I marry has to prove they can protect the company. I frowned. What does that mean? It means she hesitated. It means the marriage isn't only about keeping control. I stared at her. Then what is it about? Claire looked at me. You. I didn't understand. What? The trust includes a clause. She walked toward the desk and opened a file. The person I marry will receive voting rights. I froze. Voting rights? Yes. How many? She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because I saw the number. 20%. My eyes widened. Claire. I was going to tell you. When? She looked away. I don't know. That hurt more than I expected. Not because of the shares. Not because of the power. Because once again, she had decided what I deserved to know. You gave me a check. Yes. You asked me to marry you. Yes. But you never told me that marrying you makes me one of the most powerful people in this company. Claire looked at me. I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you would see me differently. I laughed softly. Claire, I already see you differently. She looked hurt. I continued. I thought you trusted me. I do. Then why keep secrets? She had no answer. And for the first time since I met her, Claire Whitmore looked powerless. The next morning, everything exploded. A news article appeared online. The headline was everywhere. CEO Claire Whitmore manipulated employee into marriage to secure family fortune. Attached were private documents. Our marriage agreement. The $60 million check. The voting rights clause. Everything. Someone leaked everything. The internet turned against us instantly. Investors panicked. The board called an emergency meeting. And this time, Richard wasn't trying to remove Claire alone. He was trying to remove both of us. Claire looked at the news report. Her face was pale. They want to destroy your reputation. I looked at the article. Then I smiled. Claire noticed. Why are you smiling? Because Richard made one mistake. What mistake? He showed everyone exactly what he's afraid of. She looked confused. What? I closed the laptop. He's afraid of us together. A few hours later, I walked into the emergency board meeting. But this time, I wasn't walking in as Claire Whitmore's husband. I was walking in as the person who could decide whether Richard kept his position. And nobody in that room was ready for what I was about to reveal. The emergency board meeting started at 9 a.m. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. The first meeting, they looked at me like I was a joke. A young engineer who somehow ended up beside the most powerful woman in the company. Now, nobody smiled. Nobody whispered. Because everyone knew something had changed. I walked into the room beside Claire. But this time, she wasn't walking ahead of me. She was walking beside me. That small difference mattered. Richard was already sitting at the end of the table. He looked confident, too confident. That told me everything. People like Richard only looked relaxed when they believed they had already won. He stood up when we entered. Well, he looked at me. The husband finally arrives. I ignored the comment. Claire sat down. I sat beside her. Richard smiled. You understand this meeting is about your future, too, right? I looked at him. No. His smile faded slightly. It is. I shook my head. No, Richard. I opened my laptop. This meeting is about yours. The room became silent. Richard frowned. What does that mean? I connected my computer to the screen. A document appeared. Nobody recognized it, but Richard did. His face changed. Only for a second, but it was enough. Claire noticed. What is that? I looked at her. The reason Richard has been trying so hard to remove us. The board members looked at the screen. A company name appeared. One that nobody knew, but I did. Whitmore Capital Holdings. Richard immediately interrupted. This is irrelevant. I looked at him. Interesting. What? You said it was irrelevant before anyone explained what it was. Silence. Several board members looked at Richard. I continued. Whitmore Capital Holdings is a private investment company created 2 years ago. I clicked the next page. And the owner is hidden behind 3 different shell companies. Richard stood up. You have no right. I cut him off. I have every right. I looked around the room. Because this company has been using Whitmore Technologies resources. The screen changed. Emails, financial transfers, private contracts, everything. Daniel Brooks leaned forward. Richard. His voice became cold. Is this true? Richard looked around. You're believing him? I smiled. That's exactly what you said yesterday. I pointed at the screen. But yesterday, I only had data. I clicked again. Today, I have proof. The room exploded. Everyone started talking. Richard looked at me with pure anger. You think you've won? I looked back. Yes. He laughed. You're still just a kid. There it was. The mistake. The one powerful people always made. They underestimated the person standing in front of them. I closed my laptop. That's what everyone thought. Richard stared. Thought what? That I was just a young engineer. I leaned forward. But you forgot something. The room went quiet. I wasn't hired because I needed this company. I looked at Claire. I was here because I built something this company needed. I turned back to Richard. And you made the mistake of bringing the person who understands your systems into your biggest fight. Nobody spoke because they finally understood. I wasn't Claire's weakness. I was the reason she was still standing. The vote happened 30 minutes later. Richard expected 7 votes. He had promised them. He had convinced them. But he made one mistake. He never considered that the people he manipulated would see the truth. The final result appeared on the screen. Richard Whitmore removed from the board. Permanent investigation opened. Financial authorities suspended. The room stayed silent. Richard looked at Claire. You planned this. Claire shook her head. No. She looked at me. He did. Richard turned toward me. You. I stood up. Yes. You ruined everything. I looked at him. No. I walked toward the door. You did. 3 months later, everything had changed. The investigation cleared Claire. The company recovered. The stock price reached a new high. And people stopped asking, who is Noah Carter? They knew. I wasn't the man who married the CEO for $60 million. I was the man who saved the company that everyone thought would collapse. But there was still one thing left, Claire, our marriage, the one that started as a contract, the one that started because of a joke. One night, I found her sitting in her office, not working, just thinking. That's unusual. She looked up. What is? You're sitting here without reading your report. She smiled. Maybe I'm changing. I walked closer. You are. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Claire said, Noah. Yeah. I need to tell you something. I smiled. Another secret? She looked embarrassed. No, that's new. She laughed, actually laughed, a real laugh. The sound surprised both of us. Then she became serious. When I gave you that check. She paused. I thought I was buying security. I listened. But I was wrong. She looked at me. I wasn't buying a husband. A small smile appeared. I was finding a partner. I didn't say anything because I knew what she was trying to say. Claire Whitmore didn't need someone to save her. She needed someone who would stand beside her. I still have the check. I raised an eyebrow. You kept it? Yes. Why? She reached into her desk and handed it to me. But this time, it wasn't signed. It was empty. I looked confused. What is this? Claire smiled. A reminder. Of what? That money was never the reason. I looked at the woman in front of me, the woman everyone called the Ice Queen, the woman who had everything except someone she trusted. And I realized something. The joke I made that night was supposed to be impossible. A young engineer saying he would marry a CEO if he had $60 million. Everyone thought the money was the important part. They were wrong. The real surprise wasn't that Claire gave me $60 million. The real surprise was that that woman who could buy anything finally found something money couldn't buy. Someone who chose her, and that person was me, Noah Carter, the man who joked about marrying an ice queen and ended up becoming the only person who could make her smile. 6 months after the boardroom battle, people still talked about the day Richard Whitmore lost everything. The headlines changed. At first, They called me a gold digger. Then they called me a genius. Then they stopped calling me anything. Because eventually, people stopped caring about how I entered Claire Whitmore's life. They cared about what I did after I arrived. Whitmore Technologies became stronger than ever. The company launched 3 new products. Investors who once questioned Claire's leadership started praising her decisions. And every time someone asked Claire about the biggest risk she had ever taken, she always gave the same answer, trusting Noah. The funny thing was, she never said it like it was a mistake. She said it like it was the best decision she had ever made. One afternoon, I walked into Claire's office carrying 2 coffees. She looked up from her computer. "You're late." I checked my watch. "I'm 3 minutes early." "That's late for you." I smiled. "You've changed." She raised an eyebrow. "How? 6 months ago, you would have fired someone for saying that." "I'm still considering it." I laughed. There it was, the old Claire, the serious CEO. But now there was another side too. The side nobody else knew, the side that joked, the side that trusted, the side that didn't always need to be in control. I placed the coffee on her desk. "You know, there's something I never asked." "What?" "Why 60 million? She looked confused. "What do you mean? Why that number?" She leaned back. Then she smiled. "You really want to know?" "Yes." Claire looked at the city outside her office. "My grandfather once told me something." "What?" "He said anyone could love you when life was easy." She paused. "But if you want to know who someone really is, give them a reason to leave." I looked at her. "And you thought $60 million was a reason?" "Yes." And she smiled. "You were the first person who looked at it and said no." I laughed. "That's not exactly true." She looked at me. "You wanted to reject the money." "Yes." But I smiled. "But I wanted to know why you needed me." Claire became quiet. Because that was the real beginning. Not the check. Not the contract. Not the marriage agreement. The beginning was the moment I stopped seeing her as my CEO and started seeing her as Claire. A year after our first conversation, we held our actual wedding. Not a contract ceremony. Not a business arrangement. A real wedding. There were investors there. Employees. Friends. Even people who once believed I didn't belong beside her. One of them approached me before the ceremony. An executive who had laughed when he first saw me enter the boardroom. He looked uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology." I smiled. "For what?" "For assuming you were just some guy who got lucky." I looked toward Claire. She was talking with guests. Happy. Relaxed. Something I had never seen before. I turned back. "I did get lucky." The executive looked surprised. "With the money?" I shook my head. "No." I smiled. "With her." That night, after everyone left, Claire and I sat together. No cameras. No investors. No board members. Just us. She looked at me. "Do you ever think about that night? The joke?" "Yes." I laughed. "Every day." She smiled. "If I hadn't heard you say that, you would have never gotten the check." "Maybe." I looked at her. "Maybe." Claire shrugged. "You were still annoying." I laughed. "You're unbelievable." She smiled. "But, you were honest." The smile slowly faded into something more serious. And I needed that. I reached for her hand. "Claire?" "Yeah." "If you could go back to that night." She looked at me. "Would you still give me the check?" She thought about it. Then she smiled. "No." I raised an eyebrow. "No?" "No." "Why?" She squeezed my hand. "Because now I know you would choose me without it." And she was right. That was the truth neither of us understood at the beginning. The $60 million was never the reason our story started. It was only the test. The real story began when a man who had nothing to gain chose a woman who had everything to lose. And the woman everyone called the Ice Queen finally learned the one thing money could never teach her. The greatest investment. It's finding someone who stays when they have every reason to walk away.